Hello and welcome back to the Stronghold. I'm the Magi and you know what time it is, and we're gonna get our midweek magic on. This week's midweek magic is an introduction to a brand new format called Timeless, and I thought it would be appropriate for me to read you the entire announcement. No, I'm not going to do that. What we are going to do is talk about the broad strokes of the format, how you can enter into this without sinking all of your wild cards into it, and specifically about this midweek magic event, how you can get through it with a minimal investment. But before we get into all that, allow me to do the awkward thing and promote the channel. A while back, one of my viewers was kind enough to point out that we are the only channel putting out timely midweek magic content. So be sure to subscribe right here at the Planeswalker Stronghold for all of your future midweek magic needs, because we will be bringing you a deck list or strategy every single week. So what do you say we put all this aside and just get to that? Alright, so the broad strokes of the brand new Timeless format, it's non-rotating, constructed 60 cards. And a lot of people are comparing this to the recent almost no ban historic events, because the idea is you can play any card you've ever collected on Arena. The more specific guidelines is there are going to be digital cards. There are going to be rebalanced digital cards, but anything that had a tabletop paper printing is going to be played in that method. So cards that were rebalanced for alchemy and things like that revert to their original state if they were a paper available product. And really, that's pretty cool. They're starting with no ban list. Only 3 cards are going to be restricted, and those are Channel, Demonic Tutor, and Tybalt's Trickery. And I mean, let's be honest, Channel and Demonic Tutor are restricted in Vintage. So we're talking about a pretty finite list here and a very powerful potential format. And well, that's a good thing and a bad thing. Now, I believe one of the earliest things we need to do in this conversation is temper expectations. And the first thing I want to put out there for everyone to kind of wrap their head around is the fact that no matter how many wildcards you throw into this format, you are probably not going to conquer it the first day, the first week, the first month. In fact, my advice is not to seriously start building decks for this meta until we hit about the 90-day mark, because at that point the meta would have shaken out a little bit, and any emergency bannings probably will have already happened. So try and resist the urge to just burn your wildcards. Next thing to think about, in my expectation, this format, at least in its early days, are going to be defined by 3 primary cards. The first being Oko, then Necropotence, and Blood Moon. The Oko is just broken, doing really absurd things. I think he lasted in Standard for 2 weeks before he was banned, and has basically been banned in every other major format. Necropotence is basically just card draw for life, and that tends to get pretty out of hand, particularly for things like combo decks where you just need to get there, and as long as you're not dead, you win the game. Blood Moon, on the other hand, is a little less broken in its own hands, but we all know Mono Red is a deck that is a go-to in the early days of all formats. And the fact that you can turn your all non-basic lands into mountains, and you were probably only really running mountains to start with, this card is really going to wreak a lot of havoc. I'm not saying they will get banned or they will get restricted, but certainly keep it in mind, and maybe hesitate in pulling the trigger for wildcards on these in particular. They may be the more problematic cards in the format. If you have been around Arena long enough that you have at least dipped your toe into some of the Eternal formats, be it Explorer or Historic, one of the easiest ways to get started in this format is to take a look at your existing decks and look for anything that would benefit from the newly released Allied Fetch lands or the Uncommon Tri lands, both of which are now available through Khans of Tarkir. Secondly, you can take a look at your existing decks for something like Historic and look for decks that would benefit from cards on the Historic ban list, because of course they're not going to be banned in Timeless. We talked about Blood Moon, for instance, being a very high profile card in this format, but something like Lightning Bolt might be a very easy starting point investment for you to upgrade an existing deck and start to get a little bit of the flavor of this format under your belt. Similarly, things like Ragavan tend to be very, very powerful. Oro, Oko, all of these. Wilderness Reclamation, I believe that was printed at an uncommon. All of these cards really quite good and could easily take an existing Historic deck up to the next level. Also keep an eye out for things like Dark Ritual, as well as Brainstorm. Now, if you are a new player or perhaps a dedicated Standard or Alchemy player who has never really had the inclination to move over into Explorer or Historic, and maybe you're not too sure about moving into Timeless, keep in mind all of your starter decks are technically playable in Timeless. While this might be good enough to eventually get you your 2 midweek magics, rare or better ICRs, absolutely understand that you are going to have to grind with these and get a little bit lucky. Similarly, if you are a Standard or Alchemy player, picking up something like your Standard or Alchemy Red Deck Wins variant or some form of mono blue control, both of these decks should do quite well in these areas. Maybe not as well as a dedicated deck, but it's certainly an option for players that aren't really ready to commit. And if you are looking to dip a toe, again, cards like a Lightning Bolt in your mono red deck is going to go a long way, or Brainstorm in your mono blue control really are going to punch up those decks a good bit. Now, if you think you are ready to start making the plunge into Historic, but maybe haven't done so already, the good news is if you redeemed your codes and things like that, you have some Historic and Explorer only cards, even if you don't know they're there. If you open up your AI software, I personally recommend MTG Assistant. That's Magic the Gathering Arena Assistant. When you open up that software, you can click right up here on Collection, and then a nice little trick here called the Deck Advisor. And this will actually bump your existing collection across a database of thousands of decks and recommend decks that you can build based on the cards you already own, and it defaults to sort that by the least number of wild cards. You see for this particular account, doing an Alchemy, that is probably a red deck Wins, 2 uncommons, 1 rare. That's a very small amount to invest in a deck. But anyway, you can come right up here and select something like Historic, and again, it's going to start making recommendations for you on these based on cards you already have. It's not going to be unusual for even your best option, if you've never made a conscious effort into the Eternal formats, to maybe 30 or 40 wild cards. Occasionally, though, you're going to get stuff that's very heavily Standard influenced. You might be able to get that down to 10, 15, 20 wild cards. Not a big investment really to start in a format. And you see here, the very first 4 decks here are basically all mono red. And of course, you can always take a few minutes to peruse a archive like the one that I maintain over on Aetherhub, where I've got over 200 decks, most of which are budget oriented. Doing a quick search for the keyword artisan, for instance, within Historic, that's going to bring up a bunch of decks that myself or other creators, deck brewers have created using only commons and uncommons. We actually have another upcoming Midweek Magic along a similar line. So looking at these might give you an idea of a deck archetype that you want to go for, or maybe just some individual cards that you might want to invest in to upgrade your standard deck towards a particular concept or direction. One of the easiest decks to start with in Historic is the Life variants, whether that is Mono White, Selesnya Green White, or Orzhov Black White. All of these decks are built around life gain and benefiting from that life gain beyond just your life score increasing. All of these decks are very easy to build because a lot of the cards that you want and need are actually part of your Mono White New Player Experience deck. So a lot of these decks can be built for like 10 or 15 wild cards very simply. So if you're really desperate and you don't know where else to start, consider a life gain deck variant for Historic that would translate over into Timeless. My current favorite of these life variant decks is the Orzhov life variant. It's mostly mono white and just splashing in a little bit of black. But the thing for me that makes this deck so appealing, particularly for people that are looking to take that first step into a broader Historic type format, is that 53% of this deck, the non-land cards anyway, you already own. Another 29-ish% are cards that are pretty easily available through Standard, although a couple of them might be a little bit trickier. And that leaves only about 18% of the deck that is commons and uncommons for Historic playables that really go a long way. I've got some of the more widely accepted options available in the deck list that I'm posting along with this video, and by all means you could ignore those completely and just fill in those slots with other cards from Standard that fit the same theme. The land base is really basic, a few of the gain lands because it fits the theme so well, and of course the basic lands and the other non-basic lands that you do or should already own. And if you are taking that first step into Eternal formats, if you haven't done so already, make sure that you check out the redemption codes. They're not being issued anymore, but they do still work in many cases. I've got a 1-minute short video out there that I'll link down in the doobly-doo to show you every single code in about a minute. So definitely check that out. Those packs might go a long way to filling in some of the gaps on your first deck. And boom, just like that, you have a deck to get you through this week's Midweek Magic event, put you 2 rare or better ICRs up in your collection. You haven't burned through all your wild cards, and if and when you're ready to take a bigger step into Timeless or one of the other Eternal formats, you have given those formats time to evolve and yourself more time to make a better informed decision about how to invest your resources, be that wild cards, time, or just frustration in deck building. And hey, just in case you didn't catch all that, Matt would like you to know that the deck list that we discussed in this video is going to have a link down in the doobly-doo to take you over to Aetherhub, along with a link to any other alternative lists that you might wish to consider. He only asks that you give it a little thumbs up when you're over there checking out the deck list. And I plan on live playing this event on Wednesday at 11 a.m. over on my Twitch channel, so definitely stop in and check it out. Because the Stronghold is so much more than just a YouTube channel, and you can find links to all of our other social media outlets in our profile. Because at the end of the day, we're all budget players. And as a community, we're stronger together. So like, comment, subscribe, follow, do all those things to show a little love. It's appreciated more than you know.